All right, all right, all right. What's up, everybody? The revitalization of the Conquer podcast is back. I'm your host, Ryan Bucciantini, with my brother, Jason Leydon, bringing it back. We're super excited. I know I'm excited to be bringing this back from a couple months hiatus, I think.
Shit, almost close to a year.
All right, almost a year. So we got a lot to talk about. We're going to keep this one relatively short and sweet just to get back into the groove of things. Um, but yeah, so the Open's over. Really, what I am interested in kind of diving in with you, Jay, is talking about managing athletes at different levels of their training careers, right? I know you've got an extensive background from high level basketball all the way through CrossFit to whatever you want to call what it is you're doing now, right? So that's really what I want to touch on. I think you got some real good insight. I know I've talked to a bunch of masters athletes that are trying to figure out the new season, the new format, what it is, what they're doing, and I want to try to offer a little bit of, I guess, perspective on what this can look like for them and some things they realistically may need to think about. So I guess to kind of kick it off, like talk a little bit about your emotional transition between sport, like sport, competitive, and then like more of like a lifestyle performance athlete.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think, for me growing up, I always gravitated towards sports. And it was funny. I had a conversation with a very, very close friend of mine who we really don't communicate with a lot. You know, you have those people in your lives who um are like extremely close to you, but you don't really speak to them a lot, but just
Mhm.
kind of the shit that you've been through kind of creates this bond. So I have a gentleman like that, someone I grew up with, and um, this friend of mine was a complete like savage in school, like athletic as hell, excelled in every single thing they did. He and I were really close. Our home situation, his home situation was a rough one. So there'd be times when he would kind of like stay at my house for a couple months, and he kind of always pushed me to keep going in sport because it's my competitive nature to try to like one up him, right? And and it was fascinating. We were talking the other day how we each found sports because we each came from families where, the fathers were big drinkers, war vets, who never pursued us in sports. It was like the culture between then and now was like totally different. Like I get home from work, and the first thing I do is I'm with my kids, training them and getting them better. And I talk to my kids and like, what was it like when you were coming home? I was like, well, I had to do it all by myself. Like my dad was at the bar drinking Budweisers, and my mom was a secretary doing whatever she could do to, financially provide what she could, right? And he was a similar situation. So for us to find that path of sport, and it got to the point too where as we got older, his path took a different turn, whereas he was almost emotionally more advanced than so many other people because of his home situation, what he was exposed to in his home and life. Meaning, he had a kid, I think sophomore year of high school, he had a kid, um, party situations, things that he was doing was at like a senior college sort of level, whether it was like drugs, raves, all these things. So I in turn had this natural pull to kind of join him, and he would never let me, right? So it was kind of like this weird juncture in our lives where he took a path, I think it was like sophomore, junior year, and then he kind of pushed me on the other path. And then I think that just kept pushing my competitive drive to, and I don't know where I got it from because my parents are not competitive. My dad was a swimmer, but he never made it far in sports. My mom never played sports. And they were great parents. I mean, gave me attention, but I always had to be the best, which was a good and a bad thing. So when I was playing a sport, like I had to be the best one out there. And oftentimes I wasn't, but that just fueled me to keep working harder and harder and harder and create these habits and these patterns that kind of stuck with me with everything else I did, right? Whereas I would wake up at like 5:30 a.m. and sprint up the stairs or go to high school before school started or, not go out and just train or figure out ways to exercise or work out or train, whatever it might be, right? And that kind of led me into everything else. So that obviously took me into basketball. And then from the basketball situation, I had to keep pursuing that, and I had to become better and better and better. So I went overseas. And then when that ended with my injury, I was at a complete loss. I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had to gravitate onto something else. And this is something that I talk to athletes about. And the reason why I was at a loss is because I had no foundation in anything else besides basketball. Like I was Catholic and I believed in God, but I don't think I had a strong enough foundation in God. And I didn't have a strong enough foundation in really who I was. So when basketball ended, it was a disaster, right? From fighting to racing motorcycles at a Yamaha R1, I'd rip around on the highways, and I was a complete loss. And drinking a fucking shit ton because I didn't have that foundation, which was interesting to me because my mom had a very strong foundation in God. And like we went to church all the time. And I'm not making this a God or a God podcast, but my point is athletes need to have a strong foundation, understanding who they are and something bigger than the sport that they play, because having to make a transition becomes a lot harder when you don't, right? And that's why suicide rates for Olympic athletes is extremely high, right? And lots of now, not now, but lots of organizations and ex-athletes work with Olympians and other individuals and just how to transition out of that sport when you devote your entire life to something. Because for me, my entire identity led on if I made a jump shot or not, right? Like if I had a bad shooting night, I was a failure as a person, right? If I had a great shooting night, I was fucking God Almighty, right? Walking around campus and everywhere I was. So, and it's a good and bad thing. I think it's a good thing because it continued to push and drive me, and I had to excel, good, bad, or indifferent. Like I would work my ass off day in and day out. Bad thing because once it did come to an end, I didn't know who I was or what I was. So one thing working with athletes from a transitional standpoint is really getting these people to understand that you're never going to be the best, but you have to put more weight into being able to be a good person and give good effort, and then have a strong foundation and something outside of just what you're doing. And that's something I try to talk to my kids about a lot, and I talk to athletes about a lot. And it really doesn't matter if these athletes are 65-year-olds or 5-year-olds, right? They have to understand that. So from there, I made the transition to CrossFit. I found CrossFit at that point. I went to school for exercise science and health, but at that point, there was no like boutique gyms. There's no routes to go into until I went down to a seminar in Virginia where Greg Glassman was talking, and I was fortunate enough to hear him talk and present at his level ones. And I gravitated right to that. It was kind of the community, the competition, the camaraderie, um, the shit talking, like all that stuff just kind of pulled me in. So I transitioned into being a CrossFit athlete, and that was something where I could put my energy into. I did any and every local competition that was around. I went out to the ranch for the CrossFit Games and anything and everything. Like you want to think about like drinking a Kool-Aid and telling the entire world about it. I mean, that was me, right? And it's like I alienated some of my friends who weren't involved in it or didn't understand it, and not from a malicious standpoint, but just because I was like, oh well, this is me now. Like this is who I am. Like I still never had a foundation of who I was. So this next thing was me, right? It was like an addict. And so that pushed me into that realm. And then from there is a transition into like coaching, right? And I still never had a strong foundation of who I was because my entire self-perception was on if I was a good coach or not. And I graded myself of being a good coach depending upon how many games level athletes I could produce, right? Or whatever it was. So you can see like I just took this energy that could be used for good but also bad and just kept moving it on to the next thing and the next thing, the next thing. And it it really didn't, I really didn't learn how to deal with that probably until, I don't even know, a couple of years ago, where, I had the hard transition of my kids and my wife and me wanting to be there for them more, right? Because when I was coaching, like everything, like God bless my wife and her being a strong, confident person, but also her being someone that speaks up because when we first got married, like we shotgunned everything, right? We got married, we bought a house, she got pregnant on a honeymoon, and I opened up my gym all in one fucking year. And within that, it was also me trying to prove that I was the best coach around. So that involved me every single weekend traveling to seminars, learning, or being in the gym training people. Like I was never fucking home. Um, until she had a hard conversation with me. And that was still even a struggle, right? And then when my kids started playing more sports, I came to realization, well, no, you know what it was? I had to do an assignment before COVID where the assignment was write what you would want someone to say about you at your eulogy, right? So I had to do that. And I was like, fuck. I was like, nothing I fucking wrote down about what I'd want them to say to me about if I was dead had to do with what I was spending 90% of my time doing,
Mm,
you know? And
yeah.
that led me to really reevaluate where I was putting my time and how I was putting my time. And that's really what changed how I viewed what truly is a foundation and how I viewed myself and how I was able to work with myself. So, the long end to your question, if I was trying to wrap this up, is transitioning from being a basketball player into competing in CrossFit, into coaching CrossFit, into running a business, being a father, coaching my kids' sports, now just kind of training to. If someone asks me, like, I guess they say, like, what are you doing now for training? And if I had to sum it up, I I guess I'm training to be able to kick every other dad's ass. I guess, it's like knowing that I could tell you, it's like
Yeah.
I do jujitsu 3 to 4 days a week. I don't want to compete. I don't care about competing in jiu-jitsu. I box. I don't want to get in a fucking boxing ring. I lift heavy to be strong. I continue to do plyometrics and explosiveness work and lateral work. Um, but this is kind of like the first time I don't have like a set focus of needing to prove myself in a competitive field. Probably
Yeah.
like for my entire life. Like I always felt like I needed to prove myself, right? And I don't really feel like that anymore because I feel like I don't, for me, I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm fine with who I am and what I'm doing and where I am, knowing that my priorities lie in with my family, right? And then growing the businesses and things like that. So,
Mhm.
um, so making a transition from like one thing to another at first for me was driven by ego and it was driven by having to prove myself and the achievements, right? Until recently, where it transitioned into more of a feeling of fulfillment and what kind of makes me feel fulfilled. So when I'm working with athletes, I think that that's an important concept. No matter the age group, it's like, well, what makes you feel fulfilled? Like, do you like competing in fitness? Well, yeah, okay. Well, just because the games for you aren't what they used to be doesn't mean that you need to stop because then you're not. That never fulfilled you anyways. What fulfilled you was chasing some external shiny object of trying to make an achievement. You can still have achievements. You can still do things. But if you love it and you enjoy it and it helps you feel fulfilled, then do it. You don't need to kind of, and I think that's the biggest thing for athletes that transition in and out of stuff is I think sometimes they understand where they are and what they're doing. They keep doing it. Like I have one client who was a podium at the games like 2 or 3 times, second place, first place. Um, it got to the point where he did legends. He's like, you know what? This wasn't for me. Now I just want to fucking ski with my family and not be in knee pain or shoulder pain and run around a little bit. So just program for me to look good and fucking be able to ski the slopes in Colorado
Mhm.
and crush it. And he's a pilot and be able to sit in an airplane for 6 hours and not be jacked up. Great. That brings him fulfillment. And he fucking loves doing it. And he's still training hard every day based off what his goals are. But I think the biggest thing for transition for athletes is just being able to know what fulfills them and following that path.
Do you think Meadow being born played a role in that? Like I look at myself with Bodhi, who's 5 now, and I personally am in this like life chapter of okay, well, we have number one, but I'm still trying to like financial security, all these things, like I'm very much still building. And I know like I've had the thought in my head, like long term, what sort of impact is that going to have on him? Because like I am dedicating emotional energy, physical energy into the pursuit of those things to create stability for him. And you're on number three, right? So you've kind of like you've lived through the development of Abby, of Cam, and now Meadow, but you're older, like you're already a little bit more established. So do you think, having her played into that transition of like, okay, I want to be around even more and dedicate more time for the family, and now the training priority is going to shift? Or like the emphasis on being so tied to like coaching the team, getting people to the game, stuff like that.
No, it shifted before Meadow. It
Mm,
really shifted. Um, it shifted with my son and Joss. There's one time where Joss told me that like she was like, if you keep traveling the way you do, I forgot the words, but it was something like, like we're gonna lose something,
mm,
and that was like the first like kick in the dick where I was like, all right, I gotta change something up, right? I gotta
mhm,
adjust it. And then with my daughter Abby, the only reason why I say it wasn't for her is because I could tell from a young age with her, like she's extremely athletic. And she is like all my children have different personalities. And she is probably the most independent one. Like she'll when she's ready, like she's gone. Like
yeah.
she's gonna travel abroad, she's gonna leave the house at like 17, and like I might not see her until she's 25. Like that's the type of like person she is, right? But from a developmental standpoint, a sports standpoint, she loves sports. She does three different sports, but they don't drive her.
Mhm.
And I knew that from a young age. But Cam, like for him, it was like he always had this fire of with inside the sport of really pushing and driving. So I was like, I gotta fucking be there for him. I can't. I was like, how can I look at myself and say I'm a good father, good coach if I spend half my time not coaching the person that means, is one of the most important people in my life. So for me, it was kind of transitioning with that. But with Meadow's our most timid child. It's hilarious to watch her. She's so timid with everything. Um, but she's almost like I don't know, like I'm still trying to I still gotta figure her out, as a coach and a
Yeah.
father. I don't know if I'll be able to do to her the way I coach Cam. Like Cam I push.
Yeah.
Like Cam will weight train, he'll fucking do hitting drills, he'll do shooting drills like all in one fucking day. Meadow, I gotta kind of figure that out. I almost feel like Meadow, it's gonna be I'll probably be more relaxed and laid back. You kind of like learn all along the way. Like, all right, what did I say or do that fuck these kids up that I don't need to do for the next one?
Yeah. Dude,
It's like
oh man,
how to responses and all that stuff. Yeah,
there's so much in that. Watching Bodhi started jujitsu a couple weeks ago, and I can just see he loved rolling with the older kids, but he's super worried about hurting the younger kids in his class. So he just like he gets steamrolled all the time until he rolls with the big kids. And like we had conversations with him about like it's okay to be aggressive, and he's just like, no, I don't want to do it. And like from a coaching perspective, I'm like, okay, like maybe he's the tactician. He's not
yeah,
the brute force kid. But that it's cool to, it's coaching individuality. I love it. I love it.
yeah. So analyzing kids is your kids is
It's a
if you
blessing
can
and a
if you
curse.
can yeah if you can take a step back and not get emotionally involved, like it's a blessing. You can see and discover and figure out so much fucking shit. which is tough for me, like, because I do get emotionally involved, and I'm like, I feel their strikeouts and their missed shots or their missteps in dance or whatever it might be, right? Or I feel like, if someone's talking shit, like I feel that anger from the person talking shit, and it's continually trying to catch myself. He'll be like, "Well, how would you have reacted?" And I'm like, "Well, not the way I want you to react. Like I would have punched him in the fucking face and thrown the ball at his mom, but that was me, and that was a different time back then.
Yeah.
Like that was like, like growing up playing street ball in my age was way different than it is now. Lots of fights, lots of shit talking. You had to prove yourself. It's different now in some parts, than other parts, and it's like the game is different. And so it's like trying being able to teach him the way it should be done versus the way you think you would have done. I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
fucking weird fucking, I eat because I'm unhappy. I'm unhappy because I fucking eat like, fat bastard type thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so like your transition, what I'm really interested in, and I think it's like wildly helpful for other people to hear. Like you have Ron, Annie, Mike, who you kind of like brought through the paces, brought them all to the top tier, ultimately won, you know, champions of the game. You lived the experience of transitioning out of competition. What was it like coaching someone else out of it? Obviously, Mike, I think he's the example of the skier, right?
Yep. Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was it like having that conversation of, for lack of a better term, kind of like putting people out to pasture? Like, was it their decision? Was it a you and their decision of when, the optimal time to walk from the sport and pursue something else? Like, what did that feel like? What did that those conversations like?
For me, I always make it their decision.
Mhm.
It's never my decision. I never take part in the decision. For all those masters athletes, they've always kind of been like, okay, now's the time. You
Mhm.
know, like I don't care about people feeling like they need to go out on top or, like Andy won the games, Mike won the games, Ron won the games. They all kept pushing after the games because they just loved it, right? And I think like, you look at pro athletes in other sports, like, oh, they should have left on top. That's how they remember. It's like, well, why? Like, if they love it that much, like let them fucking burn it down till they can't fucking burn it down anymore. And then they'll fucking walk away and not because with athletes, you always have that second guess of, man, can I still get out there? Can I still fucking do it? Like, and you never want to live with that. You never want to, in my opinion, go through that self-doubt of be like, man, should I just have gone one more time? Like, when you're done and when it's over. And with Annie, her knees were not good, and it was kind of like, I'm done. And she still trains with me. She
Mhm.
still does her programming, right? But for her, it was like the risk versus reward wasn't there anymore. To train to try to compete at a high level, make it, or not be able to walk anymore. Like, it just doesn't
Yeah.
equate. With Ron, he had a lot of things going on, and for him, like, he never really said it, but you kind of knew it. Like, he still does it, but it's just not quite there. And athletes know. For me, like, I fucking knew when I was doing a 1K road test, and I had to get a 2:53 for a 1K row. That's fucking painful. It's very fucking painful to get that. And
Yeah.
that's something that I pride myself on, was being able to function in that pain zone, and do well there. And I was hitting the row, and I think I had like 250 meters left. And I was just like, nah, I don't think so. And like at that
Yeah.
moment, for me, it was like I knew, like, all right, like I'm done. Like, for me to be, and what my point is, and don't get me wrong, folks, like there's gonna be training times you're like, yeah, it's just not there, it's not there. But when also like you're done, and like I knew, like I was like, yeah, it's just not. This isn't enjoyable. I don't want to fucking do it. I don't want to be here. Like, and you just kind of know, So for me, working with these athletes on the transitions, they would kind of tell me, "Hey, it's just not the time anymore." Like, all right, cool. What do you want to do? What do you want to focus on? You want to look great with your shirt off? You want to be able to transition into sport or skiing or something different? Like, that's more of the conversation. To me, it's kind of like leading with the right questions as they need them. And sometimes they might not know them. It's going to take a while. They're like, I don't fucking know. Like, and they got to sit with shit and you got to kind of, figure it out. But it's more being there to listen and support and guide them with questions for them to figure it out and not for me to figure it out.
Do you think part of that is helping them just to disassociate either from that identity or from those like performance metrics, like things that they know are required in the sport that they realistically just aren't willing to pursue anymore, and learning how to disassociate from those metrics on paper, but still train hard.
Yeah, for most of the time, they always want to associate with metrics. So it's more about finding new ones for them.
Mm.
It's more about getting them to understand what their new metrics are, what their new focus is, and why it's there.
I love that. No, I like that. So that's like,
Because I still have my own metrics. Like I was like, I want to deadlift 600 pounds at trap bar, or I want to do this, right? Um, Now it's like, I want to do, 120 pound dumbbell Bulgarian split squats.
mhm.
Like whatever the metrics are, like you always need metrics, in my opinion.
No, I like that. Yeah, I mean the metric just changes around the context or the expression. I like that. Um,
Yeah.
so Egan, I find just wildly interesting, and like the small stories you've kind of told me about him, like a pilot, just like dude had a wild training schedule, and he was a multiple year kind of build for you, right? And that is something I just think that doesn't get talked about enough. So can you just talk about what that process is like training a whether you want to call it like a multi-phase, multi-year athlete where he's not ready and you got to put the reins on him, knowing that, in whatever, 3, 4 years is when the optimal striking time is going to be. So kind of those like mid-range athletes where you're really trying to manage some personal, some egotistical expectations that they may have.
Mike is the exception because Mike is someone who, he's a wife, he has kids, he was in the military, he's a pilot. So he's someone that, going back to what I said, has a strong foundation of who he is and what really matters in his life. And I
Mm,
say that because Mike is someone who we've taken at times 1 year off from competing, 1 or 2 times, and he was no issues with it. Like injury happened, he's like, dude, like I'm injured. We need to pivot. It's not going to be there this year. We need to train for next year. And that was it. Now he's training for next year. Never looked back, never thought about it. And then we'd train and he'd go win the games or take second place or take third place, right?
mhm.
Like that happened like once or twice for him, And it's like this past games where, so he's like a complete exception where he would understand that and be able just to flip the page and understand what the focus was and why and never look back, which is hard for a lot of athletes, because they get, the FOMO or the opens comes around, the time comes around, they go, I got to do this, I want to do that. What if, what if? Maybe he thought that, but he never said it. And he just stayed the path and stayed on track for next year. And um, so going back to your question about like, what did that look like from multi-build phase is to me, when an athlete's able to recognize that, and I don't have to say it, it's almost like a godsend from a programming standpoint because I'm like, wow, now we have a legit 2 years to really program the way it should be done and not
Hmm.
like shotgunned over like a 4 or 5 month period, right?
Yeah.
And we can focus on the injuries, we can fix the imbalances, we can build more structural integrity, we can increase your strength, increase your functional ceiling, we can build the proper power and strength capacity realms and fix your or enhance your metabolic systems, right? And then bring everything together from a mixed modal standpoint. So when an athlete's able to do that, from my perspective, being a coach and a programmer, it makes programming so much more fluid and easy with the proper phases and having the right phase potentiation. Just because normally, like you're shotgun with these athletes, right? It's like it ends in if they depending on the level they get to, you might have 6 months to get them to the next phase, but it might be recovering from an injury, right? Like I backed off extensively from competitive coaching, but I have one kid who was absolutely crushing it, and he had elbow surgery 4 weeks before the Open. So think about programming and shotgunning that. It's like, dude had elbow surgery, can't move his elbow, and now we're doing the Open, and now we're going into the world. Did he qualify for World Fitness Project? So we have the World Fitness Project Tour going into in-person semifinal athlete, and he has potential to make the elite for World Fitness Project and make the games. Now, like from a programming standpoint, I'm like, Jesus Christ, like how am I going to structure a sport with every fucking modality of you know utilizing that joint, and you have to be able to utilize it in a time frame and do so where we're not going to create more damage on
Hmm.
it. So very challenging. But going back to your question with Mike, it's building out the multi-phase programs. To me, when athletes allow you to do that, is just more fluid and more of a beautiful programming picture because you can really structure things the way they should be to drive the proper adaptation in the right amount of time and not feel rushed or pressed through it.
No, I love that's how you describe it because I think it's the perfect segue. Like just hearing you describe it that way is the best possible segue for newer athletes coming into the sport, whether they've had zero
Yeah.
exposure coming to the sport or athletes who maybe were athletes that are just now dipping their toes into CrossFit, that they view the competitive cycle as every time the open comes around. And they're in such a deficiency or they're in such a deficit from where the rest of the field is. They're like, I got to be doing two a days. I got to be like throwing in all these extra sessions. And I personally, I think it just slows down their progress even more because they're not willing or allowing themselves to dedicate the emotional and physical energy towards pursuing the actual weaknesses. They're like, I want to train it all, which, part of that is a conversation on the coach's part and just educating them around that. But I mean, like, what do you say to those athletes having now, taken someone from, whether it's injury or, a developmental athlete into a champion?
That's hard. Like I've lost high level athletes because of that. I'm not going to say a name, but I was working with this one girl going back really far, like 10 years ago, before they were really like big. And they were chasing that like volume approach, which wasn't wrong, but it's wrong. It was wrong for her at that time,
Mhm.
you know? Um, and I just didn't want to do it. I didn't believe it was the right path for her to take at that moment. So I lost her. She went with another programming track and excessive high volume and granted, extremely successful. Like she was at the games, I think like 6 or 7 times. Eventually there's a point where they had to take a break due to like mental stuff, but they've come back and they're doing fantastic with it. So it's hard, right? Because it's like, all right, could I have easily made that switch and given her what she needed to be successful? Yeah, but I didn't believe in it. It was right for her. So I made kind of like the ethical stand back. I didn't want to do it and I lost him. So if you're, coaching athletes who don't quite are having a hard time seeing the forest through the trees of the big picture, You're gonna lose some, and you're gonna have some that stick with you. You know, it's a decision and a point that you're just gonna have to make as a coach. But the more you're able to stand with what you believe is the right decision, then the better your programming is going to be for that person in the long run. You know, if that means you lose an athlete from time to time, well, that's going to happen. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. You look at any single sport in the world, and athletes will change coaches if they feel like they can get what they need more from someone else, which it is what it is, right? Um, but that's a hard conversation to have with somebody. But I think the more you are staying true in what you believe is the right decision for that person and explaining why, and then leaving it up to them if they're going to put their trust in you or if they want to take it elsewhere.
Mm, like it. That's what I got for you, man. I dig it. So, any other tidbits, any other nuggets talking about managing athletes, the transitional athletes, athletes
Ooh,
leaving the sport, athletes coming to the sport? Any any words of wisdom?
words of wisdom.
I say that because I feel like we're in a weird
Nah.
phase. We're transition. Nothing. You guys
Yeah,
think it's shit.
we are. I mean, we are in a weird phase. I think people get too emotional around it. It's like,
Mhm.
CrossFit is changing. That doesn't mean like your fitness goals and your love for competing is gonna get thrown out the fucking window. Like, how many other competitions and events do you have to train in? But if you can't do that because you were searching for just like that title of doing better in the CrossFit Open or doing better in this, then I don't know, maybe it really wasn't that important to you. It's like
Mm,
for me, playing basketball, like my goal was the NBA. Okay, I wasn't gonna make the NBA. That didn't mean I stopped training fucking basketball. Just 800 other things I could do. Try to get overseas, make different levels overseas, what have you. Like, so I think we're in a time frame because CrossFit is in this weird state. No one knows what's going to happen to it. The games are changing. It's a ton harder to get there. Like, it doesn't mean you stop training and throw shit out the window. And if you're doing, you're programming for that, like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go back to group class programming and whatever. Be like, well, okay, that's fine, but maybe you just didn't really want to do what you want to do that fucking bad because
mm,
train for Wadapalooza, train for I don't know, fitness experience, train for something different. Find what you love doing and keep pushing forward to it. I think people are too quick to move on the second things get tough, the second things have uncertainty around them, the second they can't see the picture, people are too quick to move on. And to me, like that's the point where you have to dig in even more and stand tall even more and figure something else out and kind of like brave that storm, what have you, until you can see the picture clearly. If you can't see it, why are you moving on from it? You're just fucking flying around. But stand in, stand tall, look for what you need to find, and then keep going after it.
I like it.
Was there too
So,
many metaphors in that one
no, no, no.
sentence?
I dig it. No, I dig it. So I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're saying it's like it's almost a healthier environment out there with so many options. Like
I think
not
so.
just
Yeah.
being limited to the games. I mean, I thought the same thing. Like to me, there's more opportunity to actually express it, like express the sport than there ever has been.
Yeah. I think the World Fitness Project is doing a lot of things with RX and teams. You have so many other competitions, like you have Wadapalooza, which is an amazing event. You have fitness experience. You have all these things popping up and happening. It's like make those your goals. It's like, listen, we're gonna make money in fucking CrossFit. No, you fucking weren't. Like, if you were gonna make money in CrossFit, then you would be, and you already be
Yeah.
kind of like fighting for that top five position where you can actually make money. So what was it then? Was it de facto just CrossFit, or was it just the sport of fitness? And I think
Mm,
that's what you got to understand.
I dig it. I dig it. Well, all right, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Jay and I will be back probably, I don't know, once a week, every 2 weeks. once we get this thing up and
Every
running.
2 weeks, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. The rest of the Conquer crew will be joining us periodically. Shoot us if you guys have any questions. We definitely want to answer more of your questions. So shoot us a DM, hit us up. We'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy the show.
Later.